So it's a blessing to talk with you all today, and I'll start off with the necessary intro sermon joke. So, a little boy once asked his dad, "Dad, why are there so many rules in the world?" The dad thought for a moment and replied, "Well, it's like this. Rules are like fences. They're there to keep you safe from the bull that's waiting to charge at you." The boy looked puzzled and said, "But what if I want to meet the bull?" The dad smiled and said, "That's why we also pray for wisdom." The moral: sometimes fences are there to protect us, and it takes wisdom to understand that they do protect us. All right, sermon jokes out of the way. Now it's going to get dark. So, seriously, strap in. So we are temporary inhabitants of this strange land. Each of us was born into it and must learn its rules. We have fallen down the rabbit hole, and we have to figure it out. But what are the rules that govern this world? If we look to nature, there is but one rule: survive. Yes, there is beauty in a bear caring for its cub, but that bear does not intend that beauty. And its love serves the mandate of every organism: pass on your genes. Only the strongest in physical ability, mental cunning, or combined communal strength survive. The laws of nature are absolutely brutal. Here is a nature video demonstrating nature's rules. If you're squeamish, avert your eyes. But seriously, if you're squeamish, avert your eyes.
The lead wolves keep up the pace. Others run on either side, so the hare can't change direction. A tiny meal for a whole pack. The lead wolves keep up the pace. Others run on either side.
That was just going to be on loop the rest of the time. So I had to watch over like an hour of those types of videos. It was very scarring. I tried to pick one that wasn't quite scarring. There were like baby eagles eating their siblings. Like, it was crazy. But anyway, I didn't show those. So, self-interested survival, effectuated through having greater power. That is the rule we see throughout nature. But it is not only seen in nature. It can be observed throughout all of human history. Over 2,400 years ago, the Athenian historian and general Thucydides recounts Athenian representatives threatening the island of Melos. And they did a very good job of describing the laws of nature as they apply to human beings. The Athenian state: our knowledge of men leads us to conclude that it is a general and necessary law of nature to rule whatever one can. This is not a law that we made ourselves, nor were we the first to act upon it when it was made. We are merely acting in accordance with it, and we know that you or anybody else with the same power as ours would be acting in precisely the same way. And we still see humans living by the law of nature today. Russia invaded Ukraine because it believed that it had the power to do so. China would like to invade Taiwan. Iran and its proxies try to destroy Israel. North Korea would like to take over South Korea. And these are only the most high-profile, violent geopolitical rivalries. What has blinded us, in large part, is luxury. Luxury in which people forget that life is a struggle to survive. It tends to wipe away the memory and consideration of the most fundamental rule of the world. But it is a mistake to be deluded from the realities of the laws of this world, because they are entirely opposed to and separate from the higher laws of God. The New Testament is very, very explicit on this point. The world is ruled by the prince of darkness, the devil, and operates according to his rules. And there's like Bible verses coming. All right, 1 John 5:19. I'm going to read off a lot of these just to emphasize the point of the difference between the world and what we're called to live by. 1 John 5:19. We know that we are from God, and the whole world lies in the power of the evil one. 2 Corinthians 4:4. In their case, the God of this world has blinded the minds of the unbelievers to keep them from seeing the light of the gospel of the glory of Christ, who is in the image of God. John 14:30. I will no longer talk much with you, for the ruler of this world is coming. He has no claim on me. John 12:31. Now is the judgment of this world. Now will the ruler of this world be cast out. John 16:11. Concerning judgment, because the ruler of this world is judged. Hebrews 2:14. Since therefore the children share in flesh and blood, he himself partook of the same things, that through death he might destroy the one who has power over death, that is, the devil. Ephesians 2:2. In which you once walked, following the course of this world, following the prince of the power of the air, the spirit that is now at work in the sons of disobedience. So, as the Bible makes very clear, we as Christians are in this world, but not of it. The ideas that the first will be last and that the meek shall inherit the earth was laughable during Jesus' time. People thought that different people had different value depending on who they were. It wasn't until after the Judeo-Christian tradition that that idea changed. For instance, at Jesus' time, slaves their testimony would not be accepted in court unless it was extracted through torture. People believed, and many people in culture still do believe today, that the value of a human life varies dramatically depending on who the person is. But that should not surprise us. Again, for the vast majority of human history, in most parts of the world, people have believed according to the natural law. Those with power dominate those without it. We don't even need to look very far back in history. Mao Zedong, his actions led to the death, this was just about 65 years ago, led to the death of 65 to 80 million people. Genghis Khan, 800 years ago, ruled the Mongol Empire, one of the largest empires in the world. His actions led to the deaths of 40 million people. Stalin, the deaths of 40 million people. Hitler, the deaths of 35 million people. Hundreds of millions of people have been killed by others under the law of nature, of power. But God's laws supersede the laws of this world and luckily have spread around the world. Richard Dawkins, the renowned atheist, proudly calls himself a cultural Christian. That's quite the statement from one of the world's leading atheists. And he does not want to change from being a cultural Christian. He also doesn't want his country to move away from being culturally Christian. Though it is unfortunate that he doesn't enjoy the primary benefits of Christianity, namely the assurance of eternal life and the joy that comes from that hope, he is absolutely right to enjoy the secondary benefits of cultural Christianity. Because what would replace cultural Christianity? Beliefs and values are never destroyed, they can only be replaced. And what would replace cultural Christianity? It would not be something better for Christians or for non-Christians. But it is very hard for people, especially in the Western world, to see just how radically different Christian values are from worldly values because we take Christian values so for granted, especially in countries that are culturally Christian. For instance, in some radically Muslim countries, women are still being stoned to death and buried alive by their own fathers. These aren't isolated incidents either. According to Reuters, it was hundreds of women buried alive by their fathers just last year in Pakistan. And just last year in Pakistan, an angry mob broke into a police station, dragged out and lynched a man accused of blasphemy. But here's the thing. According to the laws of nature, there is nothing wrong inherently with them doing so. According to the laws of nature, these acts should not horrify us. According to the laws of nature, we are just animals. And if you look to nature, animals tear each other apart, without regard for any law besides the law of power and survival. But as Christians, we believe that there are moral laws that every person, Christian or non-Christian, has at least some access to through their God-given conscience, and that all people should follow these laws because they are transcendent in the higher laws of God. And there are clues in nature itself that God's laws are higher than the laws of this world. Here's an example which I love. Is there sound on it? All right, so this woman is accidentally raising a panther, unbeknownst to her. So, what transformed the panther? Really think about it. That panther would have ripped the throat out of that woman if it was in the wild. It would have killed her dog. And yet, the woman was able to put her finger in its mouth. So what transformed it? Love. Placed by God as the stewards of this world, we are called to live above the rules of this world and to live according to God's laws. There is no middle ground. And yet, there is a logical problem that has plagued not only Christianity, but all theistic religions that we must address if we're going to understand evil and goodness. That question, that problematic question, is why does evil exist at all? Why is there so much pain and suffering? For almost a year, as my wife alluded to, I was kept in perpetual theological discontentment over how God and evil could coexist. I read books, I argued with people, I watched YouTube videos, I lost a lot of sleep. But I did come to a conclusion that gave me a lot of peace. So I'll explain the logical problem and then the peace that I found. So here's the logical problem. So God is all-powerful, God is all-knowing, God is purely good, and there is evil in the world. So let's discuss why this creates such a problem, if all four are true. Starting with omnipotence. If God has the power to do anything, then one would reasonably assume that he would have created the world in such a way that people have free will and yet simultaneously only choose to do what is right. And hence, there would be free will with no evil. The only logical solution to the problem of evil here is to say that God can do anything that it is possible, but that it is not possible to create people with free will who will always choose to do what is right. The standard example here is that God could not create a square circle, because such a thing cannot exist. So perhaps this is the explanation, the beginning and the end of the logical problem of evil. That God has the power to do anything that is possible, but it is not possible to create free will with no evil. But this solution puts a limitation on what most people would conceive of as all-powerful. And it creates a very large theological problem of how we would then be remade in heaven and have free will in heaven, yet not sin. So it's a logical but problematic solution. But suppose we look at the next premise, moving on to omniscience. If God is all-knowing, then we could reasonably assume that God knows the future. If God knows the future and chose to create the world as it is, then he would have known full well the evil that would transpire. God would have chosen to allow unbelievable atrocities. That does not sound like a good God. Is there a logical solution here? Yes, but again, it puts a limitation on God. Perhaps God too exists within time and does not know the future, in which case, all-knowing means knowing all that it is possible to know, and maybe the future is unknowable. Again, this is a logical solution, but it puts a limitation on God's knowledge that most Christian theologians would reject. Then we can move on to the third premise, God's goodness. Perhaps the solution to the logical problem of evil is that God is just not what we would conceive of as good. Certainly, many religions across time have seen gods as more powerful versions of humans, flaws and all. But that, more than any of the other premises, is rejected, understandably, by Christianity, because we believe that Jesus died and rose for us. So God's goodness is not up for debate. So there are ways to solve the logical conflict between God being all-powerful, all-knowing, all-good, and yet evil existing. But all the logical solutions would necessitate modifying our understanding of God's power, his knowledge, or his goodness. So is there any solution to the seeming inconsistency? I think Jesus' conversation with Nicodemus offers us some insight into God's answer. In John 3, 9-12, Nicodemus said to Jesus, "How can these things be?" Jesus answered him, "Are you the teacher of Israel, and yet you do not understand these things? Truly, truly, I say to you, we speak of what we know, and bear witness to what we have seen, but you do not receive our testimony. If I have told you earthly things, and you do not believe, how could you believe if I tell you heavenly things?" I think Jesus' response to Nicodemus would likely be his response to us as well. God gave a similar answer to Job. Essentially, I am the creator of everything. I am the great I am. You could never understand me, and that is enough. So how can we make sense of the logical quandary? We can't. We lack the ability to comprehend its solution, and we might never comprehend it for all of eternity. That conclusion, that we might never understand, it might feel very unsatisfying. But the truth need not be satisfying, at least not in the way that we would expect or desire. For example, try explaining a black hole to a 2-year-old, and that past the event horizon, gravity becomes infinite. Did I lose you there? Well, that's amazing. So, most adults, they can actually understand that quite well theoretically if given enough time and enough education on it. But with infinite explanation, a 2-year-old could never, ever understand that. So if a 2-year-old can't understand what we can, then why would we necessarily presume that we should be able to understand what an omniscient God can? Thus, if there is a solution to the logical quandary, it's possible that we will never be able to grasp it because we lack the ability to do so. In the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve were told to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. That is a very confusing statement. And the confusion continues. Eve saw that the tree was desired to make one wise, or so she thought. We are told repeatedly throughout the Bible to seek truth, to turn away from falsehood, and to pursue wisdom. So why would the only thing that God forbid be to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil? Wouldn't we want knowledge? But because our knowledge is limited, God requires us to trust and obey him. Returning to the analogy of the child, there are many things that you would not explain to a child. First, the child would not understand. And second, partly because they would never understand, you would only scar them by explaining it to them, such as the knowledge of good and evil. Because knowledge of evil could do great harm to a child. And so no loving parent would ever impart that knowledge on a child. Thus, knowledge can be harmful, and a good parent would keep that harmful knowledge from a child. And if that knowledge was accessible, a good parent would instruct the child not to gain that knowledge. A good parent requires the obedience and trust of a child for the benefit of the child. There is no possible way for the child to know why they must do as instructed, but if a child follows a good parent's instructions, the child will be better off. So, it is possible that we will never understand the existence of evil. The question remaining is if we will trust and obey regardless. For me, I have gained great peace from the clarity to try to trust and obey as a good child would obey a good parent. We are tasked with believing as children, but we have good reason to trust and obey. Notice that doesn't mean believing blindly. There's a substantial difference. A good child does not trust a good parent for no reason. I would love to go into a lot of detail on what follows, but that would take another sermon. So I'll just briefly go into 3 possible justifications for our faith: science and reason, the resurrection, and personal experience. So, based on science and reason, an intelligent designer seems more probable than not. We don't have definitive proof, but we can weigh this explanation against the probability of alternative ones. We can accept on blind faith that the universe came out of nothing and has existed for all eternity. We can accept on blind faith that the origin of life came about randomly, with no evidence of this happening more than once on Earth or anywhere else in the universe. And no scientists have any credible explanation for how the origin of life took place. Science itself believes the physical world violates human logic. So it's scientists that believe this, that human logic is violated through dark matter, virtual particles, superposition, and quantum entanglement. As Niels Bohr, one of the founders of quantum theory, said, if you think you understand quantum mechanics, you don't. So if you, like scientists, believe in modern physics, you already believe that even the natural world violates human logic. Too many people falsely believe that science and Christianity are at odds, but they're not. And nothing in science shows that an intelligent designer is either impossible or even unlikely. Both science and Christianity help explain the world, and yet they both have inherent mysteries that violate human logic. Again, details for another sermon. But there is no reason to automatically disbelieve either the logic-defying laws of modern physics or the mysteries of Christianity if they offer the best explanations. And an intelligent designer as the explanation for the origin of the universe and for the origin of life are at least equally or more plausible explanations. But beyond science and reason, the resurrection is very compelling. That tomb essentially had to be empty. Even secular scholars agree if the tomb wasn't empty, then the Romans would have immediately displayed Jesus' dead body to crush Christianity. No, something otherwise inexplicable happened. Jesus was killed by the Romans. We know they were very good at effectively killing people. He was buried. The tomb was empty. His dead body was never found, and hundreds of witnesses testified that they saw, interacted with, and even touched the risen Jesus. Some of the eyewitnesses were tortured to death, and yet there is no evidence that even one of them recanted under torture. And it's not that people were gullible. No one before Jesus believed that people rise from the dead. That wasn't a thing. You can look into it, read The Resurrection of the Son of God. As my wife said, it's an over 800-page book. It goes into it in excruciating detail. And we know that no one after Jesus believes that people rise from the dead. People don't just rise from the dead. So how could people be so convinced of the seemingly impossible happening, so much so that they would die by torture instead of recanting their eyewitness testimonies? The most apparent explanation is they did interact with the risen Jesus. But beyond that, many of us, including myself, have had personal experiences that have convinced us. I won't share mine now, again, topic of another sermon, but for those who have experienced God, you know what I'm talking about. For those who have not experienced God, that doesn't mean that you can't or that you won't. There might be people who believe in God who have had no experience of him. If so, that is a mystery of faith, and your faith is likely even more commendable. But if you don't know God, you should expect that you have had no experience with him. How much experience do you have with a stranger you see from afar? Essentially none. If you are in a relationship with God, if you are not in a relationship with God, you should not expect to feel a relationship with him. He is a stranger to you. You are not a stranger to him. He knows you well, but a relationship goes both ways. So the invitation is there. God loves you and wants a relationship with you if you will accept his love. Though I do not fully understand, I believe. Though I do not fully understand, I see that God's law, love, has power over the world to transform it. We all fall short, of course. But there are also those who choose now and will likely choose for all eternity to follow the laws of this world, to follow the laws of the Prince of Darkness. Would God prevent people from choosing to follow that path? Is it not just to separate those who wish to follow the laws of the Prince of Darkness from those who wish to follow the laws of the Prince of Peace? There can be no assimilation between the two when the two are so diametrically opposed. Just a few months ago, the world was reminded of just how dark and seemingly beyond demonic human beings can be. I'm talking about October 7th. Hamas killed over 1,000 Jewish civilians, burned them alive, raped women, killed babies, killed grandparents, and kidnapped hundreds that they did not kill. I suspect that the members of Hamas will, for all eternity, choose the laws of the Prince of Darkness. To paraphrase Fyodor Dostoevsky, one of the greatest writers of all time, without God, all is permitted. But really, I think the longer explanation there is that without God, all is permitted forever. With God, all is permitted for now. For now, you can do what you want, but the consequences will come. God has promised us that all will be made right, for he is both loving and just. But what will happen when the creator of the universe returns? We all need to ask ourselves the personal question, will we receive punishment or blessings? In Proverbs 9:10, we are told that the fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. And I'll start wrapping up and the band can come up. But in wrapping up, though we may suffer for a time, it will not last. While we do not fully understand it, and we might never do so, we have the hope in Jesus Christ that all will be made right, and we will enter the kingdom of heaven, governed solely by the Prince of Peace. We all fall short, but God saves all who surrender their lives to him and accept his mercy, love, and grace. But there is no middle ground. When your allegiance is demanded, will you ultimately follow the Prince of Darkness and try to hold on to everything that you have built in this world? Or will you surrender your life to the Prince of Peace and accept fellowship with your infinitely loving Creator? The law of this world is to gain power to survive in this world. The law of God is to love. We have good reason to trust in and obey God. And if we accept God's grace, we believe in the mystery of our faith, that God's love extends beyond death, and that he will reunite us in a relationship with him for all eternity. God be with you.